Writing, variant equals, document, ID equals, 58321, hashtag part 1. The orc girl nobody wanted. The settlement of Redstone Valley sat between towering mountains and endless pine forests, a place where humans and orcs lived side by side but rarely trusted one another. The settlement was large enough to have a market, a blacksmith, a trading post, and a central gathering hall where important decisions were made. Yet beneath the appearance of peace, there was a quiet divide between the two races. Among the orcs lived a young woman named Mira. Mira was 24 years old, tall even by orc standards, with long dark hair, pale green eyes, and a small scar that ran from her left cheek toward her jaw. The scar had been there since childhood, a reminder of an accident that had taken away her parents and left her alone in the world. But the scar was not what truly made Mira an outcast. It was her silence. Mira rarely spoke unless she had something important to say. She preferred working in the herb gardens, helping the elderly, and caring for injured animals. She had a gentle heart, but in a settlement where strength and confidence were admired, her quiet nature made her an easy target. The other young orc women often laughed at her. "Look at Mira," one of them whispered whenever visitors arrived. "Perhaps today someone will finally notice her." Another would laugh and reply, "Only if everyone else in the valley disappears." Mira always pretended not to hear. She had learned long ago that showing pain only encouraged cruel people. One autumn afternoon, the central gathering hall was filled with excitement. A powerful human hunter from the northern mountains was expected to arrive in Redstone Valley. His name was Elias, a mountain Apache known for surviving alone in the wilderness and returning from dangerous hunting expeditions that would have killed ordinary men. Rumors spread quickly. Some said Elias was wealthy. Others claimed he owned a large mountain cabin and had enough land to live comfortably for the rest of his life. Soon, every unmarried woman in the settlement was talking about him. Mira stayed away from the excitement. She stood near the edge of the gathering, carrying a basket of herbs she had collected for the settlement healer. She had no interest in competing for anyone's attention. Then the great doors opened. Elias entered. The room became strangely quiet. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man dressed in worn mountain clothing. His dark hair fell to his shoulders, and his face carried the calm, hardened expression of someone who had spent years facing storms, wolves, and dangerous men without fear. Several women immediately moved closer to him. Mira lowered her eyes. She already knew what would happen. The settlement leaders began introducing the unmarried women one by one. Beautiful orc women stepped forward proudly, smiling and showing off their finest clothing. Some spoke loudly about their skills. Others tried to impress Elias with stories of their families and possessions. Mira quietly stepped backward. But before she could leave, one of the women noticed her. "Why is she still here?" the woman asked loudly. Laughter spread through the hall. Mira froze. "Perhaps she thinks Elias will choose her," another woman joked. The laughter became louder. Mira felt heat rise to her face, but she refused to cry. She turned toward the door. Then she heard a deep voice behind her. "Wait." The entire hall fell silent. Mira slowly turned around. Elias was looking directly at her. For the first time in years, someone was not looking at her scar. He was looking at her. For several long seconds, Mira could not move. Elias stood across the crowded gathering hall, his eyes fixed upon her. The laughter that had filled the room only moments earlier had disappeared completely. Everyone seemed to be waiting for something, an explanation, perhaps, or another cruel joke. Mira lowered her basket. "Me?" she asked quietly. Elias nodded. "Yes. You." A few people exchanged confused glances. Mira looked behind herself, wondering if he was speaking to someone else. There was no one standing near her. "I have nothing to offer you," she said. Elias studied her carefully. "That is not what I asked." Mira's fingers tightened around the basket. She had heard those words before in different forms. People always wanted something from her. Her labor. Her healing skills. Her strength. But no one had ever looked at her as if she were someone worth knowing. Elias stepped forward. The crowd instinctively moved aside. He had come to Redstone Valley that morning after traveling for nearly 2 weeks through the northern mountains. His reputation had reached the settlement long before his arrival. People said he could track an animal across bare stone. They said he could survive the harshest winter without help. Some even claimed he had once fought off 3 mountain wolves with nothing but a hunting knife. Yet Elias did not look dangerous now. He looked calm. The settlement leader, an elderly human named Thomas, cleared his throat. "Elias," he said carefully, "perhaps you should meet the others first." Elias glanced toward the group of women who had been competing for his attention. "I have already met them." The women immediately straightened. One of them smiled proudly. "I am Clara," she said. "My family owns the largest grain fields in the valley." Another stepped forward. "My father is the settlement's most respected merchant." A third woman smiled sweetly. "And I know everything there is to know about running a household." Elias listened patiently. Then his gaze returned to Mira. She stood apart from everyone, her old clothes dusty from working in the gardens. Her hair was loosely tied behind her head. She had not dressed for the occasion because she had never expected anyone to notice her. Elias walked toward her. Myra's heart began beating faster. "Why are you looking at me?" she whispered. "Because you are the only person in this room who has not tried to impress me." A few people laughed nervously. Mira looked down. "I don't want anything from you." "I know." "Then why?" Elias stopped a few feet away. "Because when everyone else was talking about what they could give me, I noticed you giving your basket to the healer." Mira frowned. "What?" "Before I entered, you gave the old healer the herbs you collected." Mira looked toward the basket. "They were needed." Elias nodded. "Exactly." The room became silent again. Mira did not understand. Elias continued. "I have spent years in the mountains. I've met people who would betray their own families for gold. I've seen men pretend to be brave when danger was near. I've learned that a person's character is revealed when they believe nobody is watching." His eyes remained on Mira. "You helped someone when you thought nobody cared." Mira felt something inside her chest tighten. No one had ever spoken about her that way. Then one of the young orc women suddenly laughed. "So that's what impressed you," she said mockingly. "A basket of weeds?" Mira flinched. Elias turned toward the woman. His expression changed. The warmth disappeared from his eyes. "Those weeds saved 3 children from a fever last winter." The woman went silent. Elias looked around the hall. "I know what I want." Myra's heart stopped. She already knew what he was going to say. Or at least, she feared she did. Elias turned toward her. "I want to know the woman who everyone else was too blind to see." Mira stared at him. For the first time in her life, she wondered if someone might truly be interested in her, not because she was beautiful, wealthy, or useful, but simply because she was Mira. And outside the gathering hall, the cold mountain wind began to rise. Neither of them knew it yet, but Elias's arrival was about to change Myra's entire life. Writing, variant equals, document, ID equals, 31684, ####, part 3, the choice that shocked everyone. The gathering hall remained completely silent. Mira stood frozen in place, unable to understand what Elias had just said. All her life, she had been taught that people like her were supposed to accept whatever little kindness they received and never expect anything more. Now a powerful human mountain Apache was standing in front of an entire settlement, openly defending her. It made no sense. Elias turned toward Thomas, the settlement leader. I came here because I was told this settlement had honest people and strong families, he said. I was told I could choose a woman to build a home with. Thomas nodded slowly. That is correct. Then I have made my choice. A gasp passed through the hall. Myra's heart began pounding. She already knew. No, she whispered. Elias looked at her. Mira. The sound of her name coming from his mouth made her feel strangely vulnerable. The room exploded with whispers. Her. He's choosing Mira. That can't be true. Why would he choose her? One of the women who had mocked Mira earlier stepped forward. You cannot be serious. Elias calmly faced her. I am. She stared at him in disbelief. But you barely know her. Neither did you, Elias replied. The woman's face reddened. Mira suddenly stepped forward. Stop. Everyone looked at her. Her voice was quiet, but there was strength behind it. She looked at Elias. You don't have to do this. His eyebrows tightened. Do what? Choose me because you feel sorry for me. A murmur passed through the crowd. Elias's expression hardened. I don't feel sorry for you. Then why? Because I want you. Myra's breath caught. Elias took another step toward her. I have no interest in choosing someone simply because the settlement thinks she is beautiful. I don't need a woman who will spend her days trying to impress me or competing with everyone around her. His gaze moved briefly across the room. I want someone who knows what it means to struggle. Someone who understands loneliness. Someone who can look at another person's suffering and still choose kindness. Myra's eyes began to fill with tears. She quickly looked away. You're making a mistake. Perhaps. Elias's voice softened. But it will be my mistake. Someone laughed from the back of the hall. She will never fit into your life. Elias turned toward the voice. That is my decision. The laughter stopped immediately. Mira felt a strange mixture of fear and warmth. She had spent years being told that she was unwanted. That she was too strange, too scarred, too quiet. Now the entire settlement was watching as someone chose her in front of everyone. But she was terrified. Because if Elias changed his mind later, the pain would be worse. She looked at him again. You don't know what you're choosing. Then tell me. Mira hesitated. My past isn't good. I have one too. I have nothing. Elias shook his head. You have yourself. Mira stared at him. Those simple words nearly broke her. For years, she had believed that she was worth nothing because no one had chosen her. But Elias seemed to believe that she already possessed something valuable simply by being who she was. Then Elias extended his hand. The entire room watched. Mira stared at his hand as if it were an impossible invitation. Come with me, he said. Where? Home. One word. It was enough to make her heart ache. Mira had never had a place she could truly call home. Slowly, she reached out. Her fingers touched Elias's hand. His grip was warm and steady. The moment they joined hands, the whispers began again. Some people were angry. Others were shocked. A few looked ashamed. But Elias did not care. He had made his choice. And Mira, for the first time in her life, had been chosen. Not because someone needed her. Not because someone pitted her. Not because she was the only option left. She had been chosen because someone had looked past the scar on her face and seen the woman beneath it. As Elias led her toward the doors, Mira glanced back one final time. The people who had laughed at her were now staring in silence. For once, she did not lower her head. She walked beside Elias with her shoulders straight. Outside, the mountains waited beneath a darkening sky. And somewhere beyond those peaks stood the home of the man who had just changed her life. Writing, variant equals, document, ID equals, 92741, hashtag part 4, the journey to the mountain home. The journey to Elias's home began the next morning. Mira had barely slept. All night, she had stared at the small bundle of belongings beside her bed. There was not much to pack. 2 dresses, a wool blanket, a few personal items, and the small knife her father had once given her. That was everything she owned. Everything she had ever called hers could fit inside a single worn leather bag. As the sun rose over Redstone Valley, Mira stood outside the settlement gate and watched Elias prepare 2 horses. She suddenly felt afraid. Not of the mountains. Not of the cold. She was afraid of hope. Hope was dangerous because it made disappointment hurt more. Elias noticed her standing silently. "You can still change your mind," he said. Mira looked at him. "Can I?" "Yes. And if I come with you?" "Then you stay as long as you wish." Mira frowned. "Even if you change your mind about me?" Elias paused. "I don't make promises I cannot keep." His honesty surprised her. He did not promise eternal love. He did not pretend to know what the future would bring. Instead, he offered her something she had never received before. A choice. Mira looked back toward the settlement. Several people were watching them from a distance. Among them were the women who had laughed at her the day before. Mira expected to feel angry. Instead, she felt tired. She had spent too many years caring about the opinions of people who had never cared about her. She turned away. "I'm ready." Elias nodded. They began their journey. The road quickly disappeared behind them, replaced by narrow mountain trails surrounded by towering pine trees. The air grew colder as they climbed higher. Snow covered the distant peaks like silver blankets. Mira had never traveled so far from the settlement. For the first few hours, they barely spoke. Elias rode ahead, occasionally stopping to check the trail. Mira followed quietly. Finally, she asked, "Is it very far?" "Another half day." Mira sighed. "That's far." A faint smile appeared on Elias's face. "You are free to complain." Mira looked surprised. "Really?" "Of course." She considered this. "The horse is uncomfortable." "That's fair." "The wind is freezing." "Also fair." "And you walk too fast." Elias looked over his shoulder. "I have been waiting for you." Mira blinked. "Really?" "Yes." She stared at him. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. It was a small sound. But Elias smiled when he heard it. By late afternoon, they reached the highest part of the trail. From there, Mira could see the entire valley below. Redstone Valley looked tiny from that height. For the first time, Mira realized how far away her old life had become. She felt something inside her chest loosen. Elias led her farther into the mountains until they reached a wooden cabin surrounded by tall pine trees. Mira stopped. This was his home. It was not a palace. It was not large. But it was beautiful. Smoke rose from the stone chimney. A small garden sat beside the cabin, protected by a wooden fence. There was a shed for firewood and a stable for the horses. Mira stared at it. "You built this?" "Most of it." "When?" "Over several years." She slowly stepped forward. Elias opened the door. Inside, the cabin was warm and simple. A fireplace burned against one wall. There was a wooden table, 2 chairs, a bed, shelves filled with books, and a small kitchen. Mira stood in the doorway. She suddenly realized something. There was only one bed. Elias noticed her expression. "You can have it." Mira looked at him. "What about you?" "I'll sleep near the fire." "You don't have to." "I know." Mira looked around the room. Everything about Elias was different from what she had expected. He did not demand anything. He did not treat her as a possession. He did not even assume she owed him gratitude for choosing her. Instead, he gave her space. That night, Mira sat near the fire while Elias prepared dinner. She watched him quietly. "Why me?" she finally asked. Elias continued cutting vegetables. "I told you. I want the real answer." He stopped. For a moment, only the sound of burning wood filled the cabin. Then he looked at her. "Because I know what it feels like to be alone." Mira's expression softened. Elias returned to his work. "People see strength in me. They see a man who can survive anything. They don't see the years I spent wondering if anyone would ever wait for me to come home." Mira understood then. Perhaps they were not so different. Two people who had been alone for different reasons. Two people who had learned to survive without expecting anyone to stay. Mira looked toward the fire. "Maybe this place can be home." Elias glanced at her. "Maybe." She smiled faintly. But neither of them knew that the hardest part of their journey had not been crossing the mountains. It was learning to trust that the other person would not leave. And for Mira, that lesson would take time. Writing, variant equals, document, ID equals, 15483, ####, part 5, the return of the cruel one's winter arrived earlier than anyone expected. Within a few weeks, heavy snow covered the mountains surrounding Elias's cabin. The narrow trails disappeared beneath thick white layers, and icy winds howled through the trees each night. For Mira, however, the mountain home had slowly become something she had never believed possible. Home. At first, she had been afraid to touch anything. She kept her belongings packed in the same leather bag, convinced that Elias would eventually regret bringing her there. But days turned into weeks. Elias never asked her to leave. He taught her how to track animals through the snow, how to recognize dangerous weather, and how to gather firewood without wasting energy. Mira taught him which herbs could reduce fever and which roots could be stored through winter. They worked together. Slowly, without either of them noticing, their lives began to fit together. Then, one morning, Mira heard something outside. She stepped onto the porch. Far below the mountain trail, several figures were moving through the snow. Mira immediately recognized the settlement's horses. Her heart tightened. "Who are they?" Elias came outside. He stared down the trail. "We need to find out." They waited. By afternoon, the travelers reached the cabin. Mira's stomach dropped when she recognized the people leading them. Thomas, the settlement leader, stood at the front. Behind him were several families from Redstone Valley. And among them were the same women who had laughed at Mira. They looked exhausted. Their clothing was covered in snow, and several people were carrying sick children. Elias stepped forward. "What happened?" Thomas removed his frozen gloves. "The winter storms destroyed the southern road. Our food supplies cannot reach us." Elias's expression hardened. "And?" Thomas looked toward Mira. Mira understood immediately. "The settlement is running out of food," Thomas said. "And there is sickness." Elias's jaw tightened. "You came here because you need something." Thomas lowered his eyes. "Yes." One of the women who had mocked Mira stepped forward. Mira recognized her. It was Clara. The same woman who had called her a basket of weeds. Clara looked ashamed. "We need medicine." Mira stared at her. For a moment, memories returned. The laughter. The insults. The way everyone had watched her walk away with tears in her eyes. Mira could have turned around. She could have told them to leave. No one would have blamed her. Elias looked at her. He said nothing. The decision was hers. Mira walked toward the sick children. One little boy was barely conscious. Mira immediately knelt beside him. "How long has he been sick?" "3 days," his mother whispered. Mira touched his forehead. "He's burning." She turned toward Elias. "Bring me hot water." Elias immediately moved. Mira began working. For hours, she treated the sick children with the herbs she had stored in the cabin. She prepared medicine, cleaned wounds, and instructed the parents how to care for them. She did not ask who had laughed at her. She did not ask who had insulted her. She simply helped. By midnight, the children were resting. Mira finally sat down beside the fire. Elias placed a cup of warm tea in her hands. "You didn't have to do that." Mira stared into the cup. "I know." "Why did you?" She thought about it. "Because I know what it feels like to need someone." Elias sat beside her. Mira looked toward the sleeping children. They were innocent. Elias nodded. They were. Silence filled the cabin. Then Mira looked at him. "Are you angry with me?" "No. Even though they treated me terribly." Elias's eyes became serious. "I was angry before." Mira frowned. "Before? When they laughed at you?" She looked away. Elias continued. "But I never wanted revenge." Mira studied his face. "Why not?" "Because revenge would mean they still control you." The word struck her deeply. Mira had spent years carrying the cruelty of others inside her. Perhaps Elias was right. Perhaps freedom meant refusing to let cruel people decide who she would become. The next morning, Mira helped distribute food to the families. Before leaving, Clara approached her. Mira expected another insult. Instead, Clara lowered her head. "I'm sorry." Mira said nothing. Clara continued. "I was cruel to you." "Yes." Clara looked surprised by the blunt answer. Mira did not smile. She did not pretend the past had disappeared. But after a moment, she said quietly, "I hope you become a better person." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I will." When the settlement group finally began their journey home, Thomas stopped beside Elias. "You chose well," he said. Elias looked toward Mira. She was standing near the cabin, watching the travelers disappear into the snow. "I know," Elias replied. Mira heard him. For the first time, she smiled without fear. She had once believed being unwanted was the worst thing that could happen to her. Now she understood something different. Sometimes, being rejected by the wrong people was simply the beginning of finding the right home. And Elias had chosen her long before the rest of the world learned her worth. Writing, variant equals, document, ID equals, 68214, #### part 6, the woman who was finally chosen. Spring came slowly to the mountains. For weeks, the snow melted from the highest peaks, flowing down the slopes in silver streams. The frozen trails opened again, revealing patches of green grass and tiny wildflowers that had been waiting beneath the ice. Mira stood outside the cabin one morning, watching the sunlight spread across the valley. It had been several months since she had left Redstone Valley. Yet she still remembered the day she walked away. She remembered the laughter. The cruel words. The shame she had carried for so many years. But now those memories felt distant. Not because they had disappeared. Because they no longer controlled her. Mira had changed. The quiet orc girl who once hid at the edge of every gathering was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her own worth. She had learned to hunt beside Elias. She had learned the paths through the mountains and the signs of approaching storms. She had become skilled at gathering herbs and treating injuries. But the greatest change had happened inside her. She no longer wondered whether she deserved to belong. She knew she did. One afternoon, a group of riders appeared on the mountain trail. Mira immediately recognized them. It was the people of Redstone Valley. This time, they had not come because they were desperate. They had come because they wanted to speak with her. Thomas approached first. He looked older than he had months ago. "Mira," he said. She nodded. "Thomas." He glanced around the mountain home. "You've built something beautiful here." Mira smiled. "We did." Thomas looked at Elias. Elias stood beside her, silent but watchful. Thomas lowered his head. "I came to apologize." Mira said nothing. "We were wrong about you." Behind him, several people nodded. The women who had once laughed at Mira were among them. Clara stepped forward. "You were never unwanted," she said quietly. "We simply didn't know how to see you." Mira looked at her. For a moment, she remembered the gathering hall. The laughter. The humiliation. Then she remembered something else. Elias's hand reaching toward her. "Come with me. Home." Mira realized that she did not need an apology to heal anymore. She had already healed. "I forgive you," she said. Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." Mira nodded. "But forgiveness doesn't mean I will forget." "I understand." Thomas smiled sadly. "The settlement has changed since you left." Mira raised an eyebrow. "How?" "People talk about you." She almost laughed. "That is nothing new." Thomas smiled. "Not like before." He explained that the healer had begun teaching young people the medicines Mira had once prepared. Families had started helping one another through difficult seasons. Even the people who had mocked her now spoke of her with respect. Mira listened quietly. She had never expected her absence to change anyone. But perhaps that was the greatest lesson of all. Sometimes people only understand your value after you stop begging them to see it. After the visitors left, Mira returned to the cabin. Elias was waiting for her. "You seem happy," he said. "I am." He nodded. "Good." Mira looked at him. "That's all you have to say?" Elias smiled. "What else should I say?" She stepped closer. "After everything, don't you ever regret choosing me?" His smile disappeared. He looked genuinely surprised by the question. "Mira." She waited. Elias reached for her hand. "When I first saw you, everyone in that room was trying to convince me they were worth choosing." He gently squeezed her fingers. "You were the only person who wasn't." Mira's eyes softened. "I was afraid." "I know. I thought you would eventually realize you made a mistake." "I never thought that." "How can you be so certain?" Elias looked toward the mountains. "Because I didn't choose you because nobody else wanted you." Mira's breath caught. Elias turned back toward her. "I chose you because you were the only one I wanted." Tears filled Mira's eyes. For years, she had believed love was something reserved for beautiful people, powerful families, and those who belonged. Now she understood. Love was not about being wanted by everyone. It was about being truly seen by one person. Elias lifted her hand and kissed it gently. Mira leaned against him. The mountains stood silently around them, their peaks shining beneath the afternoon sun. Far below, Redstone Valley continued its life. But Mira no longer belonged to the place where people had laughed at her. She belonged here. Beside the man who had seen her when everyone else looked away. The unwanted orc girl was no longer unwanted. She was a healer. A hunter. A partner. A beloved woman. And most importantly, she had finally learned to choose herself. Elias had chosen her first. But now, standing beside him beneath the vast mountain sky, Mira realized something even more important. She had chosen him, too. And this time, neither of them would have to walk alone.